Hello and welcome. I'm your host, Lloyd Borrell from the website electricsense.com. Today I'm thrilled to have as my guest Director of GeoVital Academy Australia, New Zealand and North America, Patrick van der Boot. Patrick is a geobiology course director of GeoVital Academy, and he teaches doctors, therapists, building professionals and other people on how to assess homes for radiation and incorporate the GeoVital approach in the homes of their clients. Patrick is based in Melbourne, Australia, and you can learn more about his work on the website en.geovital.com. That's E for Echo, N for November, .geovital, VITAL.com. Patrick, welcome to the program.
Hi, Lloyd. Thank you very much for having me.
It's a pleasure to have you on, Patrick. It's a pleasure to have you on. So I must admit, I only latched onto your work a few weeks ago, actually, when one of your colleagues, a lady called Martine Davis, who's a building biologist in the Wisconsin area, mentioned on my website that she'd attended one of your seminars and that you would make a great guest. So thanks, Martin, for sharing that. It's great to have you on, Patrick. So over the next hour, the main topic I would like to talk to you about is how to create a healthy bedroom environment. Because I think this is a really great opportunity to delve into this very important but still poorly understood topic, and I've had lots of people send me in questions, and like 75% of those questions are about the bedroom. So that's really why I'd like to focus on that. But I'd also like to talk about more generally the solutions you provide to EMFs and the different types of shielding you offer, and also geopathic stress, because I know you cover that also, and really anything else we can fit in the next hour. So Patrick, pleasure. So my first question, before we get into the meat of where we go, what we're going to talk about today, I'd like to just talk about your story a little bit. I'm intrigued as to how you got into this area of EMFs and electropollution. In one of the emails you sent me, you said you became involved in this work through personal brochures with serious health issues in your family. Can you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, sure. I was, out of all things, a pilot as a background, actually. And my partner, as it turned out, had a brain cancer. Mm-hmm. And of course, mobile phone side, used to be a business executive and spending a lot of time on the mobile. And she was getting, normal conventional medicine, chemotherapy and radiotherapy, and that backfired to the point where that was no longer an option to continue with. And so we were kind of forced to look at alternative means, what do we do now? And so that kind of led us to natural and complementary therapies. And there's lots of things you can do, but we ended up doing things like electroacupuncture, pulse magnetic field therapy, and of course, lifestyle changes, food and diet and all that sort of stuff. And that worked really well. And then we had more more members in the family, where cancers had popped up. And so we had this thought to ourselves, well, we can drag all of them to all these practitioners, but that gets costly as well. So maybe we should get the equipment ourselves. It didn't look too expensive, or didn't look too difficult to do. So we bought some of this equipment, some of that local here in Australia. Most of this equipment is all from Europe, Germany, and some of this medical equipment over there, but all of it very, very costly. And anyway, we're getting this equipment in, and I'm one of those manual guys. You've got people that get a new toy and they start unpacking and playing with it straight away. I'm one of those guys that delves into the manuals first, and then I turn it on. Okay. And anyway, I'm getting this equipment in, $40,000 piece of equipment, $20,000 piece of equipment. And I'm getting these manuals, and I open these manuals up, and on the inside page of the manuals, it's got these warnings in there. And it says, set your equipment up in an area free of electronic pollution and geopathic stress. And it was like a little slap in the face every time when I got a piece of equipment, that warning would be in there. And anyway, so I was trying to get answers. I couldn't really get answers here in Australia. Ended up, I learned to dowse somewhere, which was interesting, but really didn't give me the answers either. I bought some, like we all start, some EMF meters, which was fascinating, but you kind of figure out, wow, this is not the whole story. And so, on my quest for answers, I guess, I learned about this little company in Austria where they teach you about electronic pollution and geopathic stress at the same time. And I thought, well, it sounds like everything I'm after, so I went to Austria, I trained with them, and then I took those skills back to Australia. And it was interesting when you said in the beginning that you've only recently caught on to us, and this is something we hear all the time. And the reason for that is that GeoVital has actually been doing this for over 30 years. They're a little bit, we're getting more comfortable with it now, but it was all German-based, basically. So their world was as big as Germany, Austria, and Switzerland, and that was it. At their heyday, they had about 800 consultants in that area. And so, but now when I went away and I started talking about what we did in English on the internet, all of a sudden, we're getting all this attention from everywhere. But anyway, so, I did home assessments here in Melbourne. We started running courses here, and, people flying in from Singapore and New Zealand and, other countries. And so, we're getting all this attention. So, we're now expanding United Kingdom, Oman, and, we recently started in America, and this is how you heard of us over there.
Okay. So let's dive right in if we can and talk about the bedroom.
Sure.
So first, let's talk about the why if we can, and then the how. So what I know is that nighttime is very important for our bodies in terms of cellular rejuvenation, regeneration, detox, and that there's all this hormonal activity going on. Principally, or perhaps most importantly, melatonin production, and there's been studies done on this which show that EMF exposures impede the production of melatonin. Can you develop on that or share your views as to why the bedroom is so important?
Yeah, well, maybe just kind of this might lead into as well with how basically we got involved in all this. GeoVital is originally a naturopathic clinic based in Austria. If you look on our website or, some of our YouTube videos, and you'll see gorgeous pictures of these two buildings, right on the top of a hill, basically, gorgeous view. So we've got this naturopathic clinic, and we realized a long time ago that we can do wonderful things in the clinic. But if you keep sending your patients back to a home environment, more specifically a bedroom environment, where there is health burdens that are preventing that person from having let's call it an effective sleep, a timing where they can truly rest and regenerate, then you're fighting this uphill battle that you just can't win. You fix them up, they'll feel great. 6 months later, they come back with the same problem because you didn't fix the problem that was actually behind it all. So, even, if you go into, like nutrition and supplementation and that sort of stuff, the body should be able to do it on its own, and it can, but it needs the right environment. And like you pointed out, it's that nighttime that's absolute key. If you want to improve health, then that's where you got to start, basically. Everything else you can do as well, but that bedroom's got to be right. And so we investigated, what's amiss in these bedrooms, what can be fixed, what can be changed, and, there's lots of things that you can improve. But in our experience, it was radiation exposure, both man-made and natural. And on the other flip of the coin, the mattresses that people were sleeping on, those were the two biggest health burdens. If we fix those, then the work in the clinic got real easy.
Okay. So, so you touched on that very briefly. So, in terms of the threats in the bedroom, then, if you could just develop on that a little bit. So you say radiation and the mattresses. So, what exactly are the threats there? What kind of radiation? What are we talking about exactly? And in terms of the mattresses, what are the dangers?
Sure. Okay. Well, radiation. In our experience, it's the electrical wiring inside the house that's your most common problem. About 95% of houses we go into, and we have a philosophy that whenever possible, we like to measure the body rather than the air. This is something, we'll maybe touch on that a little later, something we identified to give us a far greater insight whether or not countermeasures are called for. So normally in an assessment we would ask somebody to lie in the bed because we can measure things in the whole house, but the bedroom is key. So as the homeowner during an assessment, we also spend the most amount of time there because that's what we got to get perfect. So we ask people to lie in the bed. We ask them to take their sock off, and we measure their foot, their big toe, for electric field exposure. And 95% of houses, we've got readings that are way too high.
Okay. So this is the situation normal in all the houses without a demand switch, that you have the current on the wire.
The electric fields.
If you have the light on or off, it doesn't matter. So we have to find a place.
So that's something, of course, every house, or almost every house has got electrical wiring, so that's something you often find. Then, of course, a problem which is also there, or can be there, is the magnetic field. So those are the magnetic fields coming from power supply. So that's cables running past the property to the property, the meter box, solar panels, inverters, those sorts of things. If the source of that is outside the house, then often you don't have any control over it, and so and that's where magnetic fields kind of stand apart because, and of course you know this, that you can't really shield against them in an economical way. The magnetic fields is something that, especially when people are house hunting, for example, is very important to measure before committing to any property. So the magnetic fields need to be measured, and if they're there, then if they're locally produced, meaning it is the wiring, faulty wiring, or it's appliances or something, then you can do something about it. But if not, then maybe moving bedrooms might be an option. And worst case scenario, if there's no safe refuge in any bedroom, then you'd potentially look at moving house. And then the third type, I guess, is the high frequency radiation. So that's the stuff that comes from transmitters, so that's your mobile phone towers, the handheld devices that people own, the Wi-Fi, the cordless phones, everything that communicates through the air. And of course, when we started, that type of radiation was still in its baby shoes. We've all seen the introduction of the beeper, and then we went to mobile phones, and look at us now. We've got mobile phone towers on nearly every street corner, and Wi-Fi devices in every pocket.
You sound like you know what you're talking about. Did you learn all this from going on your first sleepover?
No, Bobby, because I haven't gone to a sleepover.
Yeah.
So those are the the radiation types that we would be interested in looking at. Of course, there's the phenomenon of dirty electricity as well. With our approach in terms of the wiring, we like the use of what we call circuit cutoff switches, which cut the power to a circuit when they're not in use, which at night is easily achievable, and that cuts the power to the entire circuit. So therefore, if the wiring produces magnetic fields, those are gone. They often produce electric fields, and they'll be gone. If there's dirty electricity, then that will also be gone. So we like to kind of address that in that way. Then for the natural radiation, then you're talking about geopathic stress. We kind of deal with the geopathic stress that, that world of geopathic stress kind of agrees on that is there. So we assess for, underground water, and the ionization that can come of areas where you get metals and minerals and friction kind of interacting. Then you've got things like fault lines where you've got different layers of metals and minerals in different layers of the ground which have shifted. And then with groundwater, again, you get an interaction similar to what you get if you put a piece of aluminium on your amalgam filling. You get that electricity being generated. And then there's grid lines which have to do with the Earth's magnetic field as well. So we deal with those issues, we assess for those, and it's kind of, the way we do it is kind of cute. We ask people not to tell us what health concerns they're bothered by, and then not to tell us which side of the bed they sleep on, and then we figure out where this is. We use rulers to put on the bed where it is what we find, and then when we're finished, then we say basically, well, ta-da, does that mean anything to you? And then the stories come out. And then they tell us, who's being bothered by what and who sleeps on what side of the bed. And there's often, a very clear link to that. Doesn't need to be, but there often is. So those are the kind of the radiation type of things that we deal with. Then in terms of mattresses, it's quite a story. Most mattresses, they're basically made relatively inexpensively and are marketed expensively. That's why, if you go to a bedding store, yet again, there's a 50% off sale. It's all about sales turnover and marketing. We had, in terms of mattresses, we had a bit of a wish list. And basically, we started off looking for a mattress and testing for a mattress just so that we could recommend it to our patients. But in the end, we ended up testing about 600 different mattress types, and we couldn't find one that met our list of criteria. We wanted a mattress that, for example, was metal-free. When you think about it, having a massive spring system underneath you is like a big antenna. So it attracts radiation to you, and if you've got these electric fields from the wiring in the wall behind you, then they get pulled out even quicker. So that makes perfect sense. And also, what a lot of people don't realize, and if you grab a little compass, and if you have a spring-filled mattress, and if you place that compass on the mattress, and you might have to press it in a little bit through the padding, slide the compass over your mattress, and where north is. Watch that compass needle. There'll be many mattresses, not all of them, but many mattresses where you'll see that north all of a sudden change. Is because your springs have got a magnetic quality to them. And the body doesn't know what to do with a permanent magnetic signal because we're used to pulsed signals from nature. And so it interprets it as a stress signal. And it's another reason why your body kind of gets more exhausted being there than it would if it wasn't on that mattress. So the metal kind of makes sense also from a radiation perspective. We wanted a mattress that was anti-static because statically you should be neutral as well. Then we wanted a mattress because, we all sweat when we're sleeping and that moisture goes into our mattress. You want that moisture to go away. So you want an environment underneath you which has an open structure, a bit like a sponge, so it can get rid of moisture rather than sitting there. And there's mattress materials which have a closed structure, and there's materials that have an open structure. And so some of them will tend to retain moisture, and then you get problems. Bacteria and funguses gets more likely. Those sorts of issues. So you want an open structure for the moisture to go away. Also, a little bit weaved in with that is that your skin is your second breathing organ. We've got lungs, number one, and then we've got, our skin is our second breathing organ. So when you lie on a mattress, which closes off typically about a third of your surface area when you're sleeping, then again, you're reducing that oxygenation. And so we wanted a mattress that breathed really well for that purpose. And there's a little test you can do, by the way. We don't recommend everybody to do this every time, all the time, but if you put your face on your mattress, your mouth, try and breathe through it, see what happens. Most mattresses, it's like a plastic bag you're trying to breathe through. So that was, of course, also something that was important. Then we wanted little things like having a cover that's washable. It's not a big wish, not a big ask, but how many times have we looked at a mattress with a big stain on it and go, ooh, wish I could wash that. But then the hardest thing with the mattresses was that we wanted a material because we have the natural health, naturopathic clinic background, and we do things like muscle testing and electroacupuncture and Vega testing. And so we wanted a material that people did not have intolerance issues with. And so using our patients as guinea pigs, we did all testing with them. And so we had all these mattresses that we were testing, all these different materials. And so we had latex, and we had viscose elastic, and we had polyurethane and polyester, and horse hair and feathers, and wool and cotton and everything. Everything mattresses can be made out of. And we tested it on our patients. And to our surprise, there was always a big chunk of people that had intolerance issues. And are you aware of things like muscle testing, kinesiology, Vega testing?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, okay, cool. So you know that, if you want to making a product difficult for yourself, then that's what you do, right? Because it's so picky, so many people will say, nah, that doesn't work for you. Nah, your body doesn't agree with that. So we, of course, started with the natural materials because you kind of figure, that's where we'd start, and we did. But there was always a big chunk of people that had intolerance issues. And with our patients, latex was the absolute worst. Most of our patients had latex intolerance. And I have to clarify, there's a difference between an allergy and an intolerance. An allergy is classified as having a violent reaction. Now, violent could be something minor like a rash. That's still considered a violent reaction. And then you have an intolerance reaction, which often goes unnoticed. So you often have to be tested for that to see or reveal that your body has a problem with that material. And so latex, in our experience, was the worst. Viscose elastic or memory foam, you've got your normal chemical propellants and those sorts of things. So there's issues with that. But on top of that is a closed cell structure, so it tends to hold on to moisture as well. Then cotton wasn't bad, but cotton, for example, holds on to moisture very long, so it didn't meet one of the other criteria. And of course, we needed ticks in all the boxes. And so, in the end, surprisingly, we actually went back to a foam, but that foam was made without chemical propellants and using carbonated water instead. So you're left with a toxin-free foam, and then we use edible adhesives. And it's all it takes a bit of time to make it, but that's okay. We needed that to get the results with the patients that we're after. So that's in a nutshell, what we found were the most important issues to address, and when they're addressed, we get the biggest chance of success with our patients. Of course, you can never guarantee anything to an individual. We're all individuals, and our body has a certain capacity to restore, and at some point, things are also left too late. But our strike rate is nice and high, and that's, I guess, the reason why we've been around for so long.
Okay. Well, a lot of information there that you've shared. So metal-free, that obviously doesn't surprise me. Anti-static, gets rid of moisture. Yeah, that's a great idea. And the mouth test, that's a really good idea. Washable cover, again, that's a great idea. And we're testing for intolerance issues, with muscle testing, kinesiology, and interesting what you say about the latex, because there's different forms of latex, isn't there? There's natural latex and man-made latex, but certainly.
Doesn't seem to be a great difference, but it also doesn't mean if somebody has a latex mattress at home that all of a sudden, let's throw this thing out. Just go out and get tested for it. I mean, I know where I put my money, judging from our experience, but there's no need to instantly go, I've got a latex mattress. Just get tested. Go to somebody who does muscle testing or a Vega tester or electroacupuncturist and let them test you for an intolerance to latex. And I can tell you, I've had many practitioners who are in that field and they own a latex mattress and they've never thought to test it. And then literally they're on the phone with me and they say, I've never tested this. Hang on 2 minutes. And they run off and they grab their pillow and test themselves. And go, I'm intolerant to this. I never thought to test.
Yeah, actually, it's a great idea. I never thought of that either. It's a great idea because I'm on an all-natural mattress. Changed mine recently, actually, after a long while. But yeah, that's something I'm going to do. I'm going to test that, get that tested now.
Yeah, good idea. And also that word natural, you got to be careful with that, because natural really doesn't mean anything. You know, uranium is natural as well. You know, we're not going to make mattresses out of that. Just because it says natural doesn't necessarily mean your body agrees with it.
Yeah, absolutely. So in terms of the different solutions, the different products that you offer, so you talked about the mattress there. So you've got this mattress, which obviously the key is really finding the mattress which agrees with you, which you're not intolerant to. And so for some people that might be a latex mattress. For others it might be this foam mattress here that you're talking about without chemicals agreed. It's not necessarily because you've developed this foam mattress without chemicals that's going to suit everybody. The key is to get it tested. Yeah.
I mean, we've got a high strike rate with it. You know, we haven't had anybody tests intolerant on it, but you can't say that the whole world doesn't have a problem with that mattress. Of course, I'm sure there's some people out there that even that doesn't agree with them as well. You want ticks in all the boxes. So you want something that your body is in intolerance with. You want that open structure. You want something that oxygenates, and you want all those levels covered.
Okay. So in terms of stuff, still staying with the bedroom, obviously. In terms of what else you can do, so you mentioned circuit cutoff switches, which I'm also very familiar with. I've got one of those, and I've had one of those in for quite some time. Which for people that don't know, it's basically, in fact, mine's actually a gigahertz version, but they don't actually sell those in the US anymore. But so basically the idea is a device which the gigahertz, how that works is as soon as you switch your light out or whatever's drawing in your bedroom, then the circuit is cut and there's no more power in the circuit. And as you explained, that means no more electric fields, no more magnetic fields, and no more dirty electricity. So that is really an excellent investment, those kind of devices.
Just one word of warning with them, Lloyd. What we find in Germany a lot is that, over there, the concept of the circuit cutoff switch or demand switch, general public has heard about them. Yeah, these things are a good idea, I've been told. And so there's electricians going around selling these switches. And so they have no ability to test, but they say, hey, these things are really good. You've heard about them. Would you like me to put one in your house? And so what happens then, we come into those houses, I don't know if you've had that personal experience yourself, is that in most houses, that I go into anyway, it is almost never one circuit that's the problem. It is often two or more. And so if the house wasn't properly, or the bedroom wasn't properly investigated, you're very unlikely to buy a switch, install it yourself, or when you don't install it yourself, you get an electrician to do that. But if you pick the circuit you're going to put it on, and you would of course be forgiven for thinking that it is the circuit that your power points or your power outlets are on, and you're quite right that it's almost always one that needs to be addressed for the bedroom, but it is often also not the only one. And so if other circuits are still active, which are still contributing in the bedroom, you've got a nice feeling in your head because you spent a little bit of money and bought a switch and you think you've done the right thing. But if we measured your body, then we'd find out that there's been very little or no benefit whatsoever because it was either not enough circuits or it was the wrong circuit.
Yeah. So perhaps we should talk about that first then, because you mentioned earlier about you have these devices which measure the body and not the air, and I think you call them probes. So these are not exactly what I would call EMF meters. You call them field probe meters, I think. Can you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, sure. We've used other instrumentation in the past, and they've served us well. But we always had a little bit of a wish list, and so 3 years ago we developed on a interesting and very expensive path to start developing instrumentation that had our wish list for instrumentation, with all the bells and whistles, where we kind of wanted them from an assessor's perspective. But yeah, basically we have an instrument for low frequency radiation, which measures magnetic fields and electric fields, and again, the electric fields are most common. So instead of measuring, walking around measuring the air, we measured the body instead. And so what we found in the past is that in the beginning we also measured the air. And that's interesting. And if a situation is absolutely dire, then any instrument will show you that there's a problem. But in our experience, it's that mediocre exposure where if you measure the air instrument might not necessarily show you that there is a problem, but if I then measure your body, it may reveal that your body is still still has that exposure. Effectively, the difference is that when you measure the air, you measure the output. Let's say with high-frequency radiation, you measure the output of transmitters, where if I measure the body, I'm actually measuring what arrives, because you're a big antenna. And so with the electric fields, for example, as I mentioned before, we ask people to lie in the bed. We measure their foot for electric field exposure to kind of see what your body is exposed to whilst you're lying there 8 hours a day. And we've got a gorgeous video on YouTube. If you type in GeoVital and typical bedroom, I'm sure it'll turn up, where you see a situation in our training room in Austria, with a group of students that are there. And you can also see Dr. Carlos Laredo, who's a neurologist, and he's the president of the North American Sleep Medicine Society, and he comments on some of these readings. Very interesting to either see or see what that exposure looks like. You can see that circuit cutoff switch in action, so you can see when that power is removed, and then you can hear him mention some comments about that exposure as well.
I didn't show that, but his 99% of his cells, they have receptors that are activated by voltage. They're called gated voltage receptors. But they perform their job with his own electricity. If he have 300 or this, then I'm knocking down those receptors. So of course that we're going to have cardiovascular problems, neurological problems. I didn't mention this, but the two main causes of death in the whole world is cardiac problems, and if you see cardiac problems, the cardiovascular system have his gated voltage channels, and neurological problems, the same channels. I mean, different. There's 149 different varieties of those channels, but those are the same channels. They cannot pick electricity, because if they pick electricity, I can tell you, they're gonna stop functioning well.
Yeah. The body measurement is basically to reveal the problem, but then in the investigation, then we got to figure out which circuits are coming from where, and it's not a difficult process, and the homeowner is often very much part of that process. We literally can't do it on our own. So the homeowners, they help us. They measure the walls. We work with the circuit breakers, and they give us feedback about what's going on until we get to a point where we can figure out exactly which circuits are contributing or are responsible for that exposure, and then exactly how many of those switches you need.
Mm-hmm. So is this device, these is two devices, there's the low frequency radiation one, as you say, and the high frequency radiation one. Are these devices which are intended to be used by only professionals or by the public at large?
No, anybody could use them. I mean, there are professional devices, so they're small kind of. We're not known for, instrument manufacturers. Our production runs are small, and so these devices are rather costly. But anybody could purchase them. You need, of course, the high frequency instrument is very interesting. It's considerably more costly given that it measures up to 8 gigahertz, and so you get all the gold componentry and all that sort of stuff. It's very interesting to see what your body actually absorbs, especially if somebody's electrohypersensitive. it gives you a good indication. All right, what is this situation here? What do I get at work? And kind of keep an eye on that. With the low frequency instrument, it's interesting to measure, but of course, it's the investigation from our point of view of the house that's far more interesting. And that kind of brings us back to the whole thing we started off with, is that with all this radiation exposure, we get so much exposure everywhere all the time that my catchphrase in a way is I don't think there's need to be paranoid about radiation either, but you got to deal with it where it matters most, and that's that bedroom, because that's whatever money you're going to be investing into trying to deal with this problem, that's where you get the biggest bang for your buck. So it's that bedroom has got to be perfect, so you can run around measuring at work and in the car and all that sort of stuff. It's all interesting. And yes, if you go, car buying, then it would be interesting to measure that before you purchase the car. But don't lose sight of that bedroom. That's key.
Okay. And then in terms of what else can be done in the bedroom, then, so you've had because presumably the idea is, from what you're telling me here, you say they're costly devices. What kind of price range are we in?
It depends a little bit per country. So if somebody's interested, perhaps you should contact the local office. But yeah, kind of, probably on par with your kind of gigahertz devices for those sort of, frequency ranges. So it's not small change, but it's,
So
we actually
$500, $1,000, is that what you're saying?
Yeah, no, over $1,000.
Over $1,000. Okay. So typically, I'm guessing that most people would be getting somebody in. It would seem to make more sense for that kind of investment, probably, because you're going to need two of these devices, to get somebody in to do an assessment and to give you a formal assessment rather than trying to do this yourself. It would make more sense economically.
Well, yeah, it'd definitely be cheaper, but also you don't just get the reading, but you get an interpretation with it, I guess.
Yeah, exactly.
Say, all right,
exactly.
Well, this is what we've got now. Are you a homeowner? Are you renting? There's different ways of dealing with it. So we've, in terms of, because it's the, we're covering as in solutions. We have those circuit cutter switches for the wiring. The other big issue is then, of course, the high frequency radiation. And that's where, our kind of shielding paint comes in the picture. We've got our own shielding paint, and there's, the buckets they come in look very similar to something else that's on the market. And so it's easily, the assumption is often made like, same bucket, must be the same product, which it's absolutely not. And as a matter of fact, we are absolutely delighted that we now have a different color bucket, which is just something that's been really annoying for us, because this bucket that it comes in, they're fantastic for shipping. And the gentleman that holds the patent on these buckets, he's just it's like a Ford, they only come in black.
Right.
But now we're getting our own color.
You want as long as it's black.
Yeah, exactly. So, but with our shielding paint, and this was developed, over 10 years ago. We always had an interest in trying to get the paint as effective as possible, and most measuring instruments kind of work up to 3 or 4 gigahertz. Most of the shielding products out there kind of concentrate on the 0 to 4 gigahertz. And as soon as you start chasing the higher frequencies, like your 10, your 12, your 20 gigahertz, most products bow out because, to put it, well, I shouldn't say that, but from our end, it feels like we're the only ones, or almost like we're the only ones that have come to this subject from a patient orientation. We've had sick people with chronic health concerns, and we needed workable solutions to create an approach to create the maximum possibility for a wonderful outcome in terms of that health. And so everything we've done, from our approach, the way we measure, to the products that we recommend or use or have developed, have all come from that background, from that sole interest, that it's that long-term interest that we're, of that patient that we're interested in. And so what we do see in our industry is, lots of alternatives available, but there's no link to patients. There's no history that comes with that, and it seems to be that it's more, price orientated and market share and all that sort of stuff. Where, we're probably not very good marketers. We're completely social media inept. So do us a favor, go to our Facebook page and like us. But we're always just trying to do the right thing, and as a result, we wanted that shielding paint to be as good as it could, and it took us, I think it was 680 tests in the Munich test facility with the German Armed Forces. Each of those was, I think, 2,500 euros. So we spent about 2 million euros in testing 680 different concoctions of our shielding paint to get what we now know as T98. And back then, because we got all of a sudden we got really good performance up to 20 gigahertz, and back then 20 gigahertz was nobody was using that sort of stuff. But now we've got the directional transmitters. One mobile phone tower talks to another. We've got air fiber now coming in with 24 gigahertz. Now all of a sudden, what we designed 10 years ago is now what we desperately need. And we're already, again, looking towards the future because, goodness knows where we might be in 10, 20 years from now. But we seem to be the only ones interested in that higher performance. And that's where it's a double-edged sword. Not all ingredients are justified to get there. So because it's still that long-term health, yes, we need performance, but we don't want ingredients either in there that people could have intolerance issues, for example. Again, with, to give an example, there's shielding paints with latex in it. Now imagine having a latex intolerance and covering your whole bedroom in it. There's no forward thinking with that. And so that's where I think we are very different, and so is that shielding paint of ours.
Yeah, that's a very valid point. And that's really why I always say that shielding is always a last resort, because when you're introducing a shielding material, you always got to think twice about introducing a shielding material, because you might be solving one problem but creating another because of these intolerances. And that is absolutely true. And so what I'm thinking here, I'm just wondering, so in terms of because your company does these assessments, as I understand it, and so we go out and you test people. You get a person to lie on the bed, and you do your testing with your probes. And so certainly, I understand that in many cases, implementing a circuit cutoff switch or a demand switch, as it's called, is often recommended. And also changing the mattress is also recommended. But I'm just wondering, introducing shielding paints, shielding mesh, shielding fabrics, is that something that you do typically, or is that fairly rare?
Well, I don't know, the houses, I mean, and I get it, I'm sure you too, we speak to a lot of people that are either sensitive to this or they have health concerns, so the picture we get, I think, is completely distorted from the average person, right? Yeah. Because we don't get the average person ringing us. We either get health conscious people or people where they've already worked out, hang on, this is really bothering me. So in the houses I go into, goodness, it might be maybe 40, 50%, where the exposure is at a level where we would say, yeah, you would benefit from having that considerably lower. In terms of shielding and when to put it in, I'm of the belief, or we are of the belief, that certainly with the products we have, when we're building a new house, and that's quite a trend actually, because we're involved also with people that are building houses, and so the typical problems we find in most houses all the time on how the wiring is put in, because there's to be no forethought in terms of radiation, because the electrician doesn't think about that. They just run the cables in the shortest possible distance because they pay for the cable, and that's the way it ends up being. So a new built house is a perfect opportunity to have a blank canvas and actually do it right from the start. And we're involved with more and more people and families doing that. And there's an interesting development where maybe, 3-4 years ago, when we spoke to people, they would like us to do an on-site measurement of what those levels were like, and then based on that measurement make a decision whether or not they wanted to put shielding in. Where now there's just a distinct difference where now when people approach us, when we say, well, we could come on site and take a measurement, you can take a decision then, most people now are going like, well, no, actually, I don't care, because that exposure only ever gets worse. I'm building now. I'm not building 3 years from now. So just put it in and get it over with. And, yeah, I kind of agree with that approach, because it does, that exposure just increases and increases. And, yeah, I think every bedroom would be enriched from having it either protected from what's there now or future-proofed for what may come in the future.
Okay. So yes, so you're a strong proponent of shielding, of these different of utilizing these different shielding materials.
Yeah, and different cultures wake up to this whole story at different paces as well. I mean, I guess in Europe, especially Germany, people are very aware of it. To give you an example, we are currently involved on the shores of Lake Constance, the very bottom of Germany. There's a development that's going up, which are 9 apartment buildings. And each apartment building has 47 apartments in each. Now, these are nice apartments, 1, 2, 3 million euros, gorgeous view. We are shielding the outside of all those 9 apartment buildings. And the person that buys the apartment, and they're buying those off the plan, they have then the ability to select option number 2 and have the internals shielded as well of their own apartment. So, here are very forward-thinking developers that say, yes, we've got a wonderful location, we have wonderful homes, that probably sell just as well with or without, but we would like to offer healthy homes. And people are aware of radiation. People are looking for homes that are shielded. And so, here we have a whole project going up with all these shielded homes for man-made radiation and geopathic stress. And that's really something that we're now seeing, that also the building industry is slowly catching on to this. Individual homeowners, often also choose to, shield their houses also afterwards, either when it's being built or after it has been built. And another interesting development is because there are more and more people that are, we say about 3 to 5% of the population is electro-hypersensitive or, experiences some discomfort from radiation at whatever level, is that these people are looking for houses, and when they find a house that all the work has been done and using products that are, kind of have that high performance and are meaningful, that tends to return a wonderful return on investment. So you might invest, to shield the whole house. I mean, it depends on the size, of course, but, you might invest, 1,000, 15,000 euros to shield the whole house. But it could very well be that by the time that comes to selling that house, that you're fetching, double or triple, quadruple that investment because it was shielded. So it's not only an expense you get to enjoy, but it's really becoming an investment that you get to cash in on in the future.
Yeah, because more and more people are becoming aware of these dangers. But then the other side of that is, for instance, with these apartments that you're talking about there, is that people are buying this and maybe they're not aware that there's shielding on the outside, or I guess they should, but maybe they don't really take on board that they've got this shielding, and then if they're using Wi-Fi and cordless phones and cell phones and so on, then their exposures are potentially worse.
Yeah, it could be, but typically if you take a body measurement and you show, if you had to give you a controversial thing, because there's always this talk about, but what if it bounces around, this radiation, right? Radiation, this bounces around of radiation is often described as, the picture you get with it is like laser light going through a mirrored room. You know, you get that shot of that scene of entrapment with all these laser lights, going everywhere, and that's not really how it goes. It's more like a billiard ball. It goes fast against the first wall, and then dung, 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 it kind of slows down.
Right.
Also, shielding paint can absorb, or basically, it's not really absorb, but it holds it internally and leads it away through the paint itself. So with our paint, there's about 15% of that is led away. So every time it hits the wall, it gets less anyway. So I would much rather have a shielded house with Wi-Fi inside of it than to have a house that is not shielded at all and get the Wi-Fi and everything from outside.
Okay, well that's good. So just to lead on to, because we're running out of time here, but to lead on to a listener's question here, a question somebody sent in, and Derek, who's saying that he works for a university which is planning a new science building, and he's sure that they want to have good Wi-Fi in it, and he's asking, he says he sees that GeoVital consults on new building construction, and he's asking, are there ways to construct a building with Wi-Fi and still protect the health of the occupants? So what's your view on that?
Yeah, it's kind of the shielding is of course to reduce radiation exposure, and putting Wi-Fi in it doesn't make an awful lot of sense if you're trying to minimize that. So yeah, there's not really a way to do that. There is some new technology coming. It's called Li-Fi instead of Wi-Fi, right. Where basically LED lights are used to communicate like Wi-Fi does to devices that can receive it. So there's hope that might be a lot healthier, or a healthy option compared with Wi-Fi. But then again, there's also a quality to light. There's instrumentation. We're not so much involved with it, but there's people that do quite a lot of research with that you can measure. You can stand in sunlight, and these instrumentations are completely quiet. It's just a hiss, but then you stand under a tube light, and it's a horrific noise. Light is still a frequency as well. So, it's no guarantee that this Li-Fi is the be all end all. But it's something we can look for. Hope, with hope that it might be a lot better than Wi-Fi.
Mm. And Gina, similarly, she's got a question. She says, Gina in Findlay, she says, if we plan to use a shielding paint in our bedroom, where exactly do we use it? She says, I'm getting ready to repaint my daughter's room and want to do it properly. So,
wonderful. Thank you very much for asking that.
You do the assessments where you go out and see people, as I gather, but also people call in and they're asking for advice over the phone, I guess, on this kind of thing. And if they ask that kind of question.
Yeah, exactly. And we end up explaining this all the time, so thank you for asking this. Basically, it is almost always a bad idea to shield one wall. So, and we've got some YouTube videos which explain this in detail. If your interest is a mobile phone tower that just happens to be in your suburb, then you would be forgiven for saying, like, all right, well, if I shield that wall that faces that mobile phone tower, then I should get a reduction. And that may be quite right, but that reduction doesn't necessarily mean that the end result on your side of the wall is then something that is, wonderful and supportive of health. It's just a little bit less. Also, something to consider is that shielding paint deflects on both sides. So you could be shielding away the one mobile phone tower that has your interest, or that smart meter that you're looking at, but you're on your side of the wall, and if you face the other direction, there's still 3 mobile phone towers a little bit further away. There's still 52 smart meters in the rest of the street. They're still entering your bedroom as they did before, but now they're being bounced away, bounced back at you from the wall behind you, so you potentially get them twice. So the golden rule is that if you're in a room, if you're talking about a room where you're going to spend a lot of time stationary in the one spot, like a bedroom or maybe a home office, but especially a bedroom, there's a one-wall shielding is a bad idea. You basically need to box yourself in. So you do the walls and you do the ceiling. Now, if you're on ground floor, yeah, effectively. If you're on ground floor, you don't have to worry about the floor, because there's no transmitters lower than your skirting boards. Nothing's going to get underneath it and go back up. So if you are on the first floor, maybe, but the second floor definitely, then you got to do the floor. And so shielding paint doesn't tend to be a great solution for that, but there's things like shielding mesh It's called GPA. That if you've got carpet, it's perfect. You put that under the carpet, and now you've got literally a box to keep the radiation from all directions out. So if it's sorry, just to elaborate, if it's a lounge room wall and there's a smart meter on that, or there's a mobile phone tower behind it or something, then I've got no big dramas with that one wall, because you don't tend to be stationary on this side of the wall, close to that wall for a prolonged period of time. But if it's a bedroom, yeah, I would say it's a no-no. It also brings on a liability in a way that, let's say if you did shield one wall and it did reduce that level down to a level that you'd be happy with, then it comes with a responsibility that you need to come back regularly and retest, because if the telecom companies put another 2 towers on or hang some more technology on the existing towers, the picture in that bedroom can completely change without you knowing.
Exactly. And that's why, personally, my approach is, it's an empowerment approach, and that's to say that people need the meters. You need the meters yourself. At some point, you've got to take the step, particularly if you're electrically sensitive. Then you need to, firstly, you need to educate yourself about this. And secondly, you need to, get somebody in, but get the meters yourself, because it's a dynamic situation. It's changing all the time. What's good this year will not necessarily be good next year. You need to understand this.
Yeah.
And I've got another question very briefly. So Jill here is saying that she's on a very tight budget, because many people are. She's on a tight budget, and she fears that there's geopathic stress in her home. She's got 7 kids. She lives in Brooklyn. There's cell towers everywhere. Every neighbour's got Wi-Fi. People underneath have got Wi-Fi. She doesn't have a wireless router. She says, what would you suggest for a very low budget way to make improvements? Can you make practical suggestions, since it almost feels easier to bury my head in the sand than to realize the actual numbers, and still there is nothing in my power to do? So I think that's a very pertinent question, that people can feel, a lot of people feel overwhelmed by this. A lot of people feel as though they don't have the budget to do what needs to be done. Can you address that question?
Yeah, certainly. It's a difficult one, because, of course, to do it properly, you need a bit of a budget. Having said that, I also deal with, single mums, 2 children, and they're working really hard to make ends meet, and we do these assessments, and we, basically figure out what's amiss. And afterwards they're delighted, because now they at least know what's amiss and where, because it's such a waste of money if you're shooting all these arrows in the dark and you don't know where you're trying to hit. So even if the budget doesn't stress to a particular approach, then at least you say, all right, I know what needs to be addressed, so we can try and get there and try and save up for it. Now, there's different ways of doing it. Shielding fabric is something that is portable. So if somebody had like a bedroom environment and you're renting, for example, then shielding fabric could be used to make like a mosquito net or a canopy. If you leave it kind of the mosquito net idea, you tie it together with a ribbon on the top or something and just suspend it on the ceiling so it drapes to all the corners of the bed. Then you're leaving the fabric uncut effectively. So if you do move out of that house and maybe you're buying a house, now you've got a stretch of shielding fabric that you can now make curtains out of. So it's not lost. You can take it with you. Same thing with the circuit cutoff switches. And again, for the U.S., we need to look at a solution because there's currently no, I don't believe, switch available there, but something's coming. That those switches, in essence, they can be installed by an electrician, but they can also be uninstalled. So you can take them with you when you move. So that's another solution as well. In terms of, not being able to do anything, well, you try and minimize your exposure, of devices that you have, on your person, of course. You shouldn't have, mobile phones in your pocket. Even on flight mode, I don't think mobile phones should be in your pocket anyway, because they still produce magnetic fields anyway. And, there's nutrients that, support you with, with radiation exposure. I think selenium and vitamin C are 2 of those. But ask a nutritionist who knows about these things better than I do. And try and, kind of educate yourself. Don't buy things that make it worse. And I know this is a difficult kind of path to walk, because we bump into all these people all the time and saying like, oh, if only I knew about what you do 6 months ago, I wouldn't have bought this, wouldn't have bought that, wouldn't have bought that. So try and educate yourself as much as possible. Our website's got a lot of interesting articles on that. And yeah, it sounds so rude, but use your brain. You know, there's so much rubbish available that when you really think about it, it couldn't possibly work, right? You can't buy a dream catcher or a crystal. And mind you, I'm not knocking crystals. If you have the right one tested on you by somebody who, for example, does muscle testing, you can find something that's supportive, but that's not the same as protection. And so, you know, radiation is a physical force. You need a physical, protection against it, either a switch that turns it off or a barrier that deflects it or leads it away. But your little things that you can buy and, hang up or look pretty in the bedroom, it's a bit more complex than that. And so I'm sure you've seen the same thing. People ask you for advice, and they've got a plastic bag, and they open, they empty it on the table in front of you, and there's $1,500 worth of junk there.
Yeah.
That if they would have just saved the money, they would have fixed one bedroom. And if they, you start with the people that need it most. If there's anybody in the family that is sensitive or has chronic health concerns, then they've got the higher priority, and you start with those. And then, you start saving up for the next bedroom.
Yeah, excellent, Patrick. Really excellent what you're saying there. And I like the fact that you're open-minded about this, because some crystals do work. I've had a lady on called Judy Hall, who's a world authority on crystals, and but again, you've got to find the crystals that work for you. And
that's right.
So that and the crystals thing is, the crystals are not gadgets. Crystals are, many of them, they're very, very inexpensive. But yeah. And I'm of a very similar position with you about these because people are on at me the whole time about the gadgets and which gadgets should I. And so I've taken a bit of a firm view on the gadgets. And it's not that I'm anti-gadget. It's simply, and what I mean by gadgets is like pendants and stuff. And I'm not going to name brands, but there's a very well-known company that makes gadgets. I'm not going to say who they are, but I think most people know who I'm talking about. And what I say is, I don't say I'm against those, but what it is I do not, and this is from my own personal experience, because I was highly electrically sensitive. That came over me in 2002, and I had to find, and I went through all that of buying all the gadgets, and the gadgets weren't the solution for me. And some people say, well, the gadgets work, but why do the gadgets work? Do they work because you think they're working, or is it just a placebo, or what exactly is happening? And then the second thing is, are there secondary effects from those gadgets, which we don't really understand? And really, the bottom line is nothing should replace your common sense, and the common sense is EMF protection and avoidance, and it's using the meters, and it's doing the shielding where necessary, and that is the basis. That should be the basis of EMF protection. And then if on top of that, once you've got your exposures down, then you want to introduce certain gadgets, pendants, so on and so forth, on an ad hoc basis, then okay. Yeah, certainly do that. And, I've had different guests on who've spoken about different devices. Sure, and that, people that have tested these things, muscle tested them, what's what I'm talking about mainly, because it's very difficult to test many of these devices in any kind of scientific manner. But sure, why not? But the basis is, but I say to people, use your common sense on this, but keep open-minded, but use your common sense and do the basic. And there's a rigor. You've got to do what I call rigorous EMF protection. And most people overlook that step because they want the quick fix. They want the quick fix, and they don't, and there's certain things which they overlook, the obvious things.
Yeah, with the thing like the pendants and things that are harmonizers, neutralizers, balancers, all that sort of kind of take our word for it products. I often describe, it's a little bit graphical, but to hit the point home, this tends to do it. If somebody hits you in the head with a hammer every 2 hours, then paracetamol is supportive, but it's not a helmet. Right, so you can have something that's supportive and makes you feel better despite your exposure, and that's wonderful for what it is. But like you said, you got to realize its limitations.
Yeah.
And if you go in it that way, then then that's okay. But it's that, like you pointed out, it's that bedroom that's key. That's where it matters most, because that's where your body works to fix itself.
Yeah. Okay. Excellent. Well, thank you so much, Patrick, for being here today, sharing this information. There are lots of companies out there which are obviously which are selling different products, shielding paints and meters and so on and so forth. But I really like the approach of your company and the philosophy and this patient orientation, as you describe it, and that's refreshing to see. So.
Thank you very much. And if maybe I can put a little plug in there, or maybe the
whole
talk a little bit of a plug, but we're in desperate need for more consultants. So if anybody out there says, hey, I reckon that would be a wonderful thing to do, and make the world a better place, one house at a time. If that's of interest, have a look on our website. We run relatively short workshops where we just teach people how to basically find and fix. And we need a lot more help. So our courses are small. We normally do 6 people at most to keep it nice and personal, and we can do a lot of hand-holding afterwards. But if anybody's interested, we'd love to hear from you.
Terrific. And then just if you could remind people the name of your website.
That's GeoVital, and the English version is EN, as in Echo November, and then .GeoVital, GeoVital.com.
Great. So thank you, listener, for attending today, and thanks for everyone who sent in the question. If you're looking for answers on EMS and health, this is my passion. I interview people about this. All my previous interviews are available in my interview archive. There are details on my website about that. I also work with a small number of clients offering one-on-one coaching to help people overcome electrical sensitivity. Again, you can check my website for that. In the next episode, I'll be interviewing another expert, so watch your inbox for details. My name is Lloyd Borrell from electricsense.com. Thank you and have a great day. Thank you. Bye-bye.